everyone, I'm Amy. I'm an Agile coach. I work independently. I've worked with organisations such as the Co-op, lots of government departments, more recently the Wellcome Trust. And I'm going to talk to you today about how to be a digital-first Agile organisation. So what's in my talk? I'm going to go over what is Agile and digital. I'm also going to look at some examples of some strategies of being digital and Agile first, so you know what I mean, and a few tips and practical stuff to get you started. I'm going to try and leave some time at the end for some questions too. So first of all, here's a question for you. What is Agile? And a few things I often come across, a few answers to this question. They sort of range like this. So some people think, oh, it's working in an ad hoc way. Some people think it's a bit cultish. There's a lot of jargon. Seems to be this sort of agile club going on sometimes within organizations. Some people think agile means flexible working. Maybe on the more negative side, an excuse for having no discipline within a team, zero planning, that kind of thing. So I want to bust those myths for you today. And this is my view on what Agile is. It's a set of values and principles, which we're going to run through briefly now. It's a culture and mindset, very importantly, culture and mindset. And it's a couple of patterns and sets of ways of working. And we're also going to look into those two towards the end of the presentation. So first of all, big A, why I use big A Agile is because it actually comes from a thing called the Manifesto for Agile Software Development, which was established in 2001. And there was a bunch of people in a ski lodge in Utah. In 2001, they all came from a kind of technology, software development background, and they made this thing called the Manifesto for Agile Software Development. So we're going to run through that quickly now. And I'm also going to try and strip out all of these technical words for you so that you can see that it's actually not just used for a technical or digital context as well. It can be used right across your organization. So here's the original, but I'm going to make a quick change to that. And this is what I'm going to change. The word software. I'm changing that to services. Now let's read that together. So we are uncovering better ways of developing services by doing it and helping others do it. And through this work, we have come to value individuals and interactions over processes and tools, working services over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and responding to change over following a plan. And it says down the bottom here, there is value in the items on the right, but we value the items on the left more. So the things on the left, we put a lot more emphasis on. So we're not saying you don't do any documentation in Agile. We're not saying there's no processes. We don't say there's no contracts and there's no plans, but we just say that responding to change is much more important than sticking to a plan that hasn't changed for many years, for example. And focusing on your working service and doing the thing and releasing something into the world and creating value for your customers is more important than writing the document about creating that value. So it's all sort of about emphasis here. There's no rule books. And there's also 12 principles that goes along with this Agile Manifesto. And again, works in so many different contexts. So I'm just going to go over them briefly because we've got a lot of content to get through. But it's really worth mentioning because all of these ways of working come from this manifesto and these principles. So number one, deliver value to users early. This is something that I've summarized from the original principle. It's about getting something out the door quickly, and satisfying your customers by delivering this value early and often. Number 2 is about embracing change, doing that for a competitive advantage, not just saying, okay, well, we've got a whole year to try and implement this strategy, but saying, what is our strategy this week? What's our strategy this month? Number 3, delivering frequently. The original principle itself talks about delivering from 1 to 2 weeks to every month, trying to get another iteration or a change to your proposition, to the way you work out the door much more frequently than you might have in a sort of traditional world. And then number 4, working in cross-functional teams. What do I mean by that? I mean working with multi-skill sets in one team. So not in a sort of siloed way where you might hand off to another team, but putting everyone you need to get the job done into one team. In a digital context, that might be having a designer, a developer, a content writer, a tester, a strategist, a manager, all of these things inside of one team rather than teams of designers or teams of developers. Number 5, support and trust your people. This is all about building teams around motivated individuals. It's not just a nice human thing to do, it's really, really good for business. When a team member is feeling motivated and supported, they're going to do their best work. Number 6, we've got communicate face-to-face. This was actually written, the manifesto was written before we had a lot of these awesome distributed tools to help us talk to each other over the internet. But the concept remains the same, where we want to do not just sending an email or something that might be less personal, writing a note, but actually speaking to your fellow humans in your team, seeing the whites of their eyes, and communicating and collaborating together. Number 7, measuring progress by what you deliver. I think this is a bit of a step change sometimes for people who might be used to saying, yeah, we're on track because we've delivered 50% of our project plan, rather than saying we're on track because we've delivered 50% of the savings that we wanted to achieve. So really putting that emphasis on what you're delivering and what outcome you're looking to achieve. Number 8 here we have maintaining a sustainable pace. Because what happens when everyone's tired and worn out? Mistakes, bugs, errors, defects. So that sustainable pace is really important for a healthy team. And number 9, keeping a focus on quality. Can't just do everything like loads quicker and forget about design and service excellence. Number 10, we want to keep it simple. This is all about the art of maximizing the work not done. Keeping it really simple, doing something really, really well in a simple way. And number 11, let's allow teams to self-organize. Let's give them a really good understanding of what the priorities are and then trust them to go and get that job done. Finally, number 12, we want our teams to be reflecting and improving, not just on the service or the product or the proposition, the content, whatever it is you're delivering, but also on the process you're using as a team to get that work done. So that's a regular thing you'll find in Agile teams. So they're the principles. And the question here then is, okay, so that's Agile, but what do I do now? Where's my step 1, step 2, step 3? This is no rule book here. And that's important because we're always on a mission to be more agile, to be more sustainable. I'll go into that in a little bit. But there's also some things to just sort of help you get started as well. Some methodologies. And here's just a few. There's so many different Agile methodologies. And you can go out and you can get certified in these methodologies if you like. You can read about them on Wikipedia. You can do some research. And you can also just get started. And a couple of the really popular ones at the moment within Agile are Scrum. They're probably the most popular. Kanban as well, although a lot of people consider that more as a sort of lean methodology, but Agile and lean work very, very well together. They come from the same history, the kind of Toyota production system, that manufacturing background. The Lean Startup is a wonderful book and gives you lots of ways to get started working in this way. And there's so many others. Extreme programming, especially if you're a technical person, extreme programming will work really, really well for you. It's one of the originals. Again, there's plenty here. So as an Agile coach, for me, I am methodology agnostic. I like to know a bit about all of these, and I like to look at different problems that I face and think, okay, well, actually Scrum would work really well for this problem. Or for this team, Kanban. Let's get inspired by Kanban. So I would urge you to look at not just one of these methodologies, but lots of them, but also think about the values and the principles of that original Agile Manifesto, instead of just using a methodology in a rigid way. And this is what I think. I think the methodologies are a little bit like learning your musical scales. They'll give you maybe some meetings out of the box to do. They'll give you some governance out of the box. They'll give you some patterns and some ways of working. And then eventually you might learn to play a bit of jazz. So you're probably wondering, what's that difference then between, what's some sort of like maybe obvious differences between the traditional project management way of doing things and an Agile way of doing things? So the most obvious one to me is the sort of more traditional way. You would use a Gantt chart like this. These are sort of linear, interdependent stages, all connected. And it looks a little bit like a waterfall. So you might hear people saying waterfall versus Agile. And that's because you can see you've got your tasks and your planning there kind of cascading down like a bit of a waterfall. And so if I just compare the waterfall way of doing things to an Agile way of doing things for a second, you'll see what I mean. So here's a typical stage gate type process you might go through, whether you're using a Prince2 methodology or something like that. You might take your scope, which could be A, B, and C, and D, for example, just as an example scope there. And you would take all of those things, A, B, C, D, through a planning stage. You would then go through a design stage with that whole collection of scope. Then you would go through a build stage, maybe a test stage, and then you would launch. You might also think it's not build, it might be deliver, might be execute, might be transition, not launch, but very similar in different contexts. And with Agile, you would just take one of those chunks and do all of those stages. So you would take A and you would plan, design, build, test, release, and just get that thing out the door, get that value delivered for your customers and for your users early, and then build on it with B, make it slightly more complex, build on it again with C, and so on. No big bangs. And so why is this? So this is a picture of the shard by, you could probably notice there. And I think Agile is for when we're not working on civil engineering projects. That previous slide where we go through our design stage and we lock that down and we sign that off, and before we move on to that next stage, is for when things are very costly to change, like building something like the shard. Because if we changed our mind halfway through building the shard, it might mean that the whole project is bankrupt. It might mean that we'd have to start again, that we'd have so much money ode to our different finances. There's lots of negative impacts from changing our minds halfway building something as huge as that. But when we're experimenting with different propositions for the way we work and for our customers, and when we're experimenting with different products, and when we're maybe doing organizational change projects or digital projects, we just don't have that same cost of change. We just don't have that risk. And so it's actually not that necessary to lock down that design phase as much as it would be if you were working on a civil engineering project. So let's cover what is digital first. Second, rather. Okay, here's a great quote from a wonderful thought leader in this space, Tom Loosemore. So he says, digital is applying the culture, practices, processes, and technologies of the internet era to respond to people's raised expectations. So nowhere in there do we say, wow, it means a specific technology, it means working in a tech team, it means anything that is about doing things on a web app or on your mobile phone. We're talking about culture, practices, all the technologies, they're changing every day. And our expectations in the internet era, what's happened there? So the pace of change in the world, for example, is faster than ever before. So my expectation with my mobile phone, my smartphone these days, is that my software is probably going to update on a daily basis, maybe every other day. I'm going to be expecting to read the latest news. I don't have to wait to the end of the day for the newspaper to report that news, then print it, then distribute it to me. That pace of change is faster than ever before. So I'm going to give you a couple of digital first examples just to bring that to life. So first, before I do, I just want to mention, Agile is not an end state. I work with a lot of Agile teams who are trying to be more Agile, but actually are very Agile to start with, but they can get better. And also within your organization, you'll have a different comfort level with how Agile you can be. And certainly if you're just introducing it, how Agile is everyone ready to be? For example, if you're a pharmaceutical company, you can't release a new drug every day because you might kill somebody. Same with something that might be a food product. But there's safe ways to try and make ourselves more agile. So we just keep that in mind when we go through these next bits of slides. So when people talk about digital transformation, what do we mean? Sometimes people mean moving services that have been traditionally face-to-face to digital, or maybe something that's over the phone to digital, and paper and post to a digital channel. So sending email instead of sending paper, maybe putting things into a database instead of printing paper, or filling in an order form or an invoice on a piece of paper. Same with telephone services. You get a lot of web chats these days for customer services because people just don't want to use their telephones during the day. And your face-to-face is very expensive. All of these things on the left, much more expensive than digital. And digital can be cheap to change and evolve. And people seem to prefer it as well. We're starting to see. And then I think there's also some cultural stuff here with Agile transformation. So moving away from validating the hippo. Now, what do I mean by the hippo? Hippo, the highest paid person's opinion. So someone in your team going, I've got this fabulous idea, and because they trump you, they get their idea built or implemented. So instead of that, we want data-driven decisions and ways of understanding customer needs and solving problems rather than what our opinion is of those problems. And also moving away from this kind of long-term planning. We don't know what's going to happen to the world in a year's time. We don't know what's going to happen to the markets. This pace of change is faster than ever before, remember? So what do? We move to experimentation instead, shorter term planning cycles. So, that could be a couple of weeks to a couple of months or less. You could be planning every couple of days. So just looking at Zara for a second as an example. So in this book, Managing Supply Chains, which is actually from 2004, the quote is, Zara, the company, can design, produce, and deliver a new garment and put it on display in its stores worldwide in a mere 15 days. Now, if that was 2004, I started to think what it is now. I can only imagine they've dialed up that agility if we think back to that scale I showed you before, and it's much faster. And so what have they done? They've moved away from that kind of much more longer term planning and development, because that type of longer term planning and development often results in a much higher number of markdowns on their products and their garments. And they've moved to a shorter term planning and development cycle, which results in a low number of markdowns. So I've got a couple of stats here for you. So we're looking at short life cycle products. When you get that wrong, when you get the sort of fashion demand wrong, you can really suffer from these markdowns, sometimes up to like 50 to 70%. And Zara's are actually around 15%. And again, these were stats from 2004. So I'd love to think that they're even better now because they've dialed up their agility. Also, responding to changing customer demand. So fast fashion, the kind of I want it now, internet influenced buyer of today. They're not just buying things online, they're just inspired by different things online every day. They're not waiting for your catalog. They're seeing things on Instagram, whether that be food that they want to buy, whether that's a new garment, and using that data to make production decisions. Okay, just looking at Amazon really quickly. So here's an interesting picture someone in my network took a couple of years back. So there's a chap here sitting in the street in East London with lots and lots of Amazon packages, and we've got some people here on the side theorizing about what's going on here. Now, Amazon famously do these experiments, and my question here is, I wonder, did James catch Amazon mid-experiment here? A few people here are saying, is this the secret behind Amazon Prime's 1 hour delivery capability? Just predicting what people are actually going to buy in the next hour, shipping those packages to the side of the road in East London, not even having a warehouse, and seeing if they can fulfill that demand. Now, Amazon's never written anything on this subject. These sorts of experiments are quite closely guarded, but this is the kind of relentless focus on customer need that we have come to expect from them. So again, traditional retail, we've got hippos, the highest paid person's opinion. Our hippo idea of what our proposition should be, grand ideas and long-term planning versus just this like, let's give it a go. Let's put someone on the street and see if maybe these people are going to order these packages in the next hour. Let's see. Shorter term planning on the right-hand side. And then this is something that Amazon has written about, actually spoken about. So you can watch the YouTube video here. John Jenkins from Amazon.com. He said that they deploy code. So if you think of code as just anything that's actually making this platform work, it could be different propositions, different ways of marketing products on Amazon. This could be things to make the platform work and content. So they deploy new code every 11.6 seconds on the average weekday. That's a lot of change going on when a lot of organizations, if you go and ask your organization, how often do you deploy code? Some people might say, oh, every 3 months in the worst case scenario. I've seen it as bad as every 6 months to 12 months. It could be, oh yeah, when, maybe every week, every couple of weeks. And sometimes you'll find people are doing it daily. That's great. But 11.6 seconds, that's Agile scaled up to the max there. This is delivering value for your customers every 11.6 seconds. I think that's pretty phenomenal. And again, 2011, I expect this to even be better now. Okay, and just a quick example here from publishing. So remember the old Encyclopedia Britannica? I used to have that on my bookshelf as a student at school, and trying to look up things at home for homework, and understanding that unfortunately this encyclopedia is about 10 years old, and so is the information, versus what's happening now with Wikipedia. Now, what's the pace of information being updated here on Wikipedia? I actually pulled these stats up this morning. So in the last 3 months, there was 9 million total daily edits to the English language Wikipedia over the last 3 month period. So if we just have a look at the chart here, it's definitely every day over 120,000 edits, and sometimes a lot higher, sometimes over 200,000. So moving from, if we think about that in the context of the pace of change in the world, in my lifetime, in the last 20 years, 30 years, we've gone from, waiting for an Encyclopedia Britannica to update or our family to buy one, to this kind of update with our information. Now, whether or not this information is correct is a completely different topic, but certainly we're getting this pace of change. So here's some tips. Make your work visible. Here's a picture of me actually in front of a board I created for the Government Digital Service. That's in the Cabinet Office in Holborn. And each one of these cards represents a website that was moving on to gov.uk. I think this was 2013. So this is about showing the sheer volume of this transition work that we were doing. So a couple of tips for you. You can start today by putting all of your and your current team's tasks on index cards on the wall. Just find an empty wall in your area. Maybe group them into different stages as well once you have all these tasks on the wall. A really simple way to start is just in a sort of to-do, doing, done. And also maybe breaking them down. If you're used to working on something for a month, maybe start breaking down that goal, that monthly goal, into smaller tasks. Okay, stand-ups. This is something that often happens. Some people call them daily scrums if they're working with the Scrum methodology, but daily stand-ups, lots of teams use these to put that principle of working and collaborating together, communicating together face-to-face into practice. There's a couple of pictures there of some different people. There's some, this is inside the co-op, those two pictures down below. There's a tech team on the left and the food team on the right. And some other pictures from around the internet up there. Even speaking to someone remotely, as you can see in the top right-hand corner. So here's some stand-up tips. Don't just stand up and talk to each other in the morning, because you might just go, oh, yesterday I went to a meeting. Do it around your task wall. Focus it on something that's real and real tasks that you're working on. Be really strict about timing. Make sure it's only like 10 to 15 minutes maximum. Try and cut people off if they love talking. And try it daily as well, you know, and while you try doing it, maybe try reducing those other more traditional update meetings. Let's say to the team, let's try this for a month rather than doing our update meetings that might take, you know, hours. Let's try quick stand-ups. Understand your users. Do some user research. Understand your customers. Bring those insights back to the team, share it with the team. Some pictures of, again, some co-op team members here. So here's some tips from some user research. Don't just test your current service. And what I mean by service is not just your website, but your proposition, everything that you're working on right now. But also try and understand your users. Like, who are they? You know, how and when do they interact with your organization? Is it when they're really stressed? What are their motivations for getting in contact with you? Get that context about that. It will really help with the design process and help with your proposition design as well. Go way beyond surveys. Surveys just tell us a very small part of the whole picture. Try observing like customer call centers, do some interviews with some customers, set some customers some tasks to see if they really understand your proposition as well. Just observing someone using a website sometimes and saying, why don't you go and buy a packet of lettuce, and just see what they actually do. There's a term here, goob, get out of the building. User research doesn't happen at your desk. User research happens out there where your customers are. And then finally, do it quickly, regularly, bring it back to your team. There is obviously space for long form user research, customer research, but in our agile world, we want these insights quickly and regularly. Another picture from co-op here. So hold regular work in progress demos with your stakeholders. This will really help. Bring them along with your agile journey. Bring them along with what you're working on. And get used to showing that work in progress rather than the finished article. Because we should be never finished. We should be always evolving. Here's some tips. So invite everyone who has a stake or an interest in your service. Hold a demo roughly every 2 weeks. That's usually the sweet spot in my opinion. Sometimes you can do it a bit less, maybe every month if you don't have really a lot going on, but it's much better if you've got more going on. Also, keep it interesting. Use videos of your user research subjects, perhaps. Maybe add a bit of theatre. Rotate your demo presenters. Okay, also time boxing. We talk about sprints sometimes when we're talking about Agile, and especially using the Scrum methodology. And feel free to go away and read up about this. There's loads on the internet after this webinar. So one of the things you do in Scrum, or in a sort of time-boxed way of working, is you would prepare a bit of a backlog that you would work to. And then every week you stop and you do a bit of sprint planning. What are we going to work on for the next 1 to 2 weeks? And then you set off on your sprint. During the sprint, every day you meet for a daily stand-up. At the end of that week or 2 weeks, or however long that you're making your sprints last, you would do a bit of a demo, a bit of a review, and just look at what's been completed, look what's done. And then finally have a bit of a retrospective. This is one of the critical parts of being agile. Reflect and improve, continuously improve, not just your service, but also your process. So yes, we want to plan tasks or components that can be finished within that sprint, not just have work in progress at the end of the sprint. That's a really important tip. And then also, we always talk about potentially shippable. So what do we mean by that? A version that you can put out in front of your users, not just have a work in progress thing that's waiting for a big bang launch. because you're just playing at being agile. And finally, okay, the unit of delivery is the team. This is a wonderful saying that my colleague from government work that I've worked with and at the co-op, Jamie Arnold, has coined this phrase: the unit of delivery is a team. Remember that all comes back to a good functional team. So what do we do with our good functional team? How do we maybe get started with Agile? A couple of things you can do to get started here. So you can ask permission for a bit of a protected space away from the normal bureaucracy for a limited time, because the important thing here is to prove that this way of working is a good way of working. Don't just take my word for it. Don't just take all the hype for it. Prove it and make it work for your organization. And I think the best way to do that is to get that protected space to just give it a go rather than compromise on different ways of working. Then later on, you can think about transformation of everybody else, but at least prove that it could work for your organization first in that sort of protected space. Pick something small and simple to work on in that protected space. So you might have heard that term before, a minimum viable product, something really simple, a different proposition in a greenfield environment. What do I mean by greenfield? I mean something that doesn't require loads of systems changing and integration and changing everybody's worlds. Everyone's going to have an opinion about that. Make something, build something, try something in a completely different context, away from the norm, away from the rest of the organization. And a really critical part of this is to empower a single person to make these decisions without the need to get this sign off or to go through millions of layers of governance boards, because Zara wouldn't be able to release that garment every 15 days if they had to wait 30 days for the next board meeting or the 3 layers of board meetings. So there we go. My tips for how to be a digital first agile organization. Thank you very much.